Working away here on our 63 Coupe de Ville. So I thought we'd take the time to do a little bit of video. So basically what we're doing is we're going around the car, we're making sure everything is blocked and sanded. Now if you hadn't seen the videos and it's been a while, we'll do a little recap. So basically the primer you're looking at is a urethane primer. We did a couple coats. These panels were pretty straight. We did a lot of body work to them. So this is a high build urethane primer. Now that said, it wasn't all that high building, but I mean some of the minor scratches and stuff it might have taken out. So we're gonna go ahead and block that. And here you have a little bit of a lighter color. Now this is the stuff I like to use and my favorite stuff. This is the CRE 321. Now in black it's CRE 921. But at any rate, I use this most of the time everywhere. Now it's a hybrid epoxy and it's very sandable and you can make it real thick. Now if you want it to kind of smoothen out, you can add a percentage of reducer to the final coat. And as you can see, you can see a little bit of grit or orange peel, but it's very, very little. What we basically did around the windows, around the door jambs, and all those hard to get spots in case something's missed, it's your best chance of it sticking really well. Same around the back window, and then we did our urethane primer on the roof and all the way down and across the deck. We also did our CRE all the way around the trunk edge. Now where we did something a little different than CRE and urethane is once all that was done, while we were still within the window of painting, we only came down so far, and I think we did them in CRE. But at any rate, from here to the bottom, we did these in G2 featherfill. And the reason why, now this side wasn't too bad, we did 2 coats. We'll come in here, and as you can see, it's not very thick. And I started sanding it, but I'll show you a few techniques here in a minute. But basically, we did the featherfill on the quarters because, for one thing, they're 9 feet long, which is pretty insane, but there was trauma. Now on this side, when they pulled all the clips off that held the molding, whatever pry bar they used, they put a little dimple. So we basically filled the whole side of the car about 6-8 inches wide, blocked it back into the body, and then, we checked it out a lot. We did it traditionally with filler. And then at the end, we primed it, and then we did our feather fill on top. So, just to make sure we get it out. Now, something that no one knew about. Now, I did suspect there was some funniness happening here. Looked like a cracking and shrinking, but it was way in underneath. It wasn't in the paint. You could tell it was coming from below. And what we discovered as we went down this quarter panel, this car had been hit on this side, and I think it was put in a ditch. And the reason I say that, the bottom down here had some rot we had to repair, but there was some waviness right in this area, I believe. Now, the door needed some patchwork, and as we come back, there was little dings, and then back here in the door, we found a pretty deep dent. Like it was probably 3/4 of an inch deep, and they just filled over it. But you could see that there was a wave. Maybe it shrunk, that's an awful pile of filler to expect to hold out. And I mean, this would have been done, assuming the owner's correct and he didn't know about most of this damage. It would have been done previous to 1980. Well, that could be. This is a 63, so it was already 17 years old at that time. And you could tell where the side of the car had been repainted with the same gold color that was on it from new. So, takes us back to here. Big dent down there, little dents. This whole fender was dents. And from about here back was crinkled and in. Now what we did is we stripped all the filler out. We pulled some of the dents out, and we basically refilled the whole thing with less filler. Our goal is to be less than 1/4 of an inch. You go by the TDS sheets, that's what they want you to do. Now, we're probably not even going to be 1/4 of an inch once we block it all down. Again, you can look in these holes and it gives you some ideas to a little bit of built up thickness. We don't have anything here that's too crazy. Now this side, you can see that little bit of black streaking. So what we've done is we sanded this area off, and we just kept feathering off this edge and keeping it as straight as we could. Of course, I just wiped black everywhere, but there's a pretty good body line. We used basically a round Durablock. That was about 1 foot long, and we just worked it back and forth, and you try to keep the strokes up and down, right? We used a round block, but we basically went crisscross, you know, and we just kept it moving back and forth, and you try to keep it about even, and you watch your body line. Now, I did that first, and the reason why is as that comes off, you can almost see the line. Now, when the line is good, we know we're good. Then what I did is I rubbed some black across the top. This is a powdered guide coat, but we also rubbed this whole quarter, and then we blocked this quarter, which left us a line. Now, some of it's wearing out because we did it last week, and we did go over the edge just to soften the edge. But this was all done in 220, and so was all the bottom. So I'm going to have to go from this line down now. We're going to block it again with 400, and it's not going to take much. But we did quite a bit of feather fill. I think we did I want to say we did 3 coats. Or maybe I just slowed down, put it on a little fatter. But on any rate, we did a lot of feather fill on this quarter because we want to make sure we get it straight. Now sometimes, and this happened, even though we got it straight, this is the only metal that came through. So we're pretty happy with that. Now some guys will tell you that you should have metal showing everywhere. Now depending on the car, that's true. But I mean, I don't think we had to do that here, but we're not done yet. There's places where you can see we're starting to cut through. Now we sealed all that filler out first with a thin coat of reduced Cree 321. So when we cut through, we see the Cree, which is just as sandable, which is nice. So this so far has been working pretty good for me. So we're going to block this one more time, but there's little places where you can see through. And then here, the guide coat left this showing here. This is a little bit of a low spot we're going to have to fix. So there's a little spot down there. So that's not bad. We got a couple little spots, and then we'll seal them in. Now on this side, well, let's show you what we're going to do. So here we've got some Kovacs dry guide coat. It's just black. Now, as you can see, I started blocking here, and as you come up, you can see the orange peel showing. Now, you got to sand till all that's gone. But what you don't want to do, this is the sander I'm using. It's your basic 16-inch board file. They're pretty flat, they're pretty rigid. So some people will say the Durablocks, look, I use them all the time. They say that the surface may not be 100% perfect and all this, but when you're doing Bondo work, these are great. You're always moving, so those little surfaces are going to kind of, you know, within reason. But once we're into the primer, some people will still use Durablocks. I usually like to go to these. This is our round block. I've got 400 on a strip. Now I noticed this particular paper that I tried to use here, it seems for 400, it seems to be a little sharper. But at any rate, we just cut a round one in half, trimmed that and stuck it on there. And we used it to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So we came in like so. I'm twisting it as I'm going, and I just keep moving it along. And then I go the other way. And you want to do the same amount of strokes roughly, and then keep going, and you know, it should come out pretty straight. Now this car is going to be I'm going to call this a high-end driver. Like, this isn't going to SEMA or anything like that. But we had a pretty good budget, so we're trying to do it to a fairly high level of appearance when we're done. And as you can see, speaking of highs and lows, so you can see all our primer sealer in there, epoxy, and then here's where our feather fill was used to block all that out. You can see it here, that's already sanded. That's perfectly smooth. But you can see how one was ripply and this filled it out. So now that's all real smooth. We're happy with that. So what I like with some of the primers, as I showed you down here, they kind of show you your highs and lows. But if you want to try something like this, well, let's show you how it works, right? Look at that. You can see your orange peel already. And here you can see where I blocked from the line down. So I just basically came off that panel, and then I'm going to start working my way up. And then this way, and then overlap it into what we already did. And again, this wasn't sanded yet. You can see how the orange peel is very, very fine. There's a little more up here. So let's set that up. Hope our focus is half decent. For talking purposes, we often leave our masks on, but in this case, I'm just going to put it on. We're going to sand that into here just to show you how it turns out. Sorry about that. As you can see, we're basically just going to guide coat the whole thing. It's a little weird down here because we smoothed it out already, but we're going to sand all that black off. That's our longboard with some 220. We're using a sticky back so we don't have them clipped. You can use either or. I'm not a big fan of the ones with Velcro, and the reason why is because I feel like it could have the potential to leave unevenness. But realistically, for most people, it's probably fine. This is just what I like to do and the way I like to do it. And we're not pushing into the car too hard. Just letting the paper kind of do the work. You can and put minimum pressure because we want the spines to hold it flat. And as you can see, not only is it showing us where the orange peel is, like in there, but it's showing us the low spots. So we know there's a lot of primer here, so we got to make sure we sand till that goes away. But what we don't want to do is come in here with a little piece and make this smooth. We want to work the whole area of the block and keep going back and forth. And eventually, it all works down together. We got orange peel up here, it's slowly coming out. Our low's going away. You can actually feel it, not just the bumps, but there's like a low. Now, assuming you got good eyesight, this allows you to see what you're doing. This is a broom that never sees dirt. I pretty much only use it for this sort of thing. Take some of the stuff off the paper. I'm watching for little sticky buildup spots. Once that happens, I toss the paper. Now you don't want to go up and round over the edge. You just want to go past. That'll leave a sharp body line, and at the end, we'll take a little chunk of 400 and just take that razor sharpness off. All right. So the one way. Now we also want to go the opposite way. And you can hear the sandpaper make a different sound because it's still sharp in that direction. Now you do want to keep track of, when the paper's no longer sharp, change it, because you don't want to make things smooth to the touch. You want to cut it down and make the plane smooth. Hopefully I'm allowing you to follow along. Concentrating here to get this one plane, and then I'm kind of going up over here a little bit, but always working across, and then I'll come down here and do the same thing. And when this looks good, I'm going to keep blocking right over the whole thing. Again, you get little spots like this where you see through almost, that's what you want. It means you have minimal product on the car. So basically you put a lot of stuff on the car. By the time you're done, most of it's on the floor. pulling it very, very lightly. Now, obviously, we're not done, and that's all right. Give me a second. Clearly, we got to come up in here. We've got a lot of primer here, and I kind of knew that the way I sprayed it, so this will have to be blocked over here, because what you're doing is you're not making this smooth. You're going from here to here like a bridge, and you're trying to flow it out. So the door on a car doesn't come perfectly flush. It comes, and then often the quarter will have a little bit of a wave out, like the Coke bottle effect. So we can take quite a bit off of here, but if you get to where it's smooth and you've exhausted and sanded and you start cutting through to the other layer of primer where we had already blocked filler, we can stop and fill low spots. Now in this case, I'm pretty sure there's not much there. That's going to come right off. Now sometimes when you're blocking, it takes a long time, and as you can see, this went pretty quick. So we barely touched this area, but we did do just below this line, concentrated on getting that straight, because what I wanted to do was make that straight going across here. And you can still see there's some highs and lows, but we want to take everything down a little bit and keep going, because we want to take it all down together. I think that's the key, or at least what works for me with having a car that's not too wavy. We still got to go down in here. We haven't touched that. Of course, you can see the orange peel down here is very minimal. It's almost smooth like paint. You know, you could almost cut and buff that if it were paint. But we're going to block that to the line, and then we're going to lift the car and go down here and block that as well. We're blocking the whole car. Now down there, we might use a Durablock, because it's easier to hold, and we'll probably be lying down and under the car and blocking and dropping all the dust on our chest. You're going to learn how to do aerobics when you're doing this, because you're going to be all over this thing. But this is what you want to achieve. And again, this is in 220, so 320 and 400. And the reason I say 400, all the products I use, I can paint over this stuff finished in 400. Sometimes I'll do 500, but it's pretty rare. But there's certain paints where you want to do that, or you're trying to achieve something. We're doing a basic metallic red with a base coat clear coat, and the tech data sheet says 400 grit to 500 grit. Now, once your paper goes a little dull, your 400 grit is less than 400 grit. So that's where you'll end up. Now I noticed the sound and the feel of my block wasn't quite the same as I started getting to that last little spot, and that's why I stopped early. We're going to change out the paper. That'll come with a little bit of experience, but just because I've talked about it, and you've probably seen videos where other guys have talked about it, you'll kind of start noticing it. It's a lot like school. The more repetitive you do something in practice, the better you eventually get, right? So as you can see, we didn't spend a lot of time back here, but we were coming back in this area so that we could block out this area here and working our way back, because you want it to all be straight and blend. Looks like a low here, but we still got to block all this peel out here. And then as we come forward, that's probably going to go away. And if not, like I showed you, there's a little dimple on the other side up here, but in the similar, sometimes if you want to stop, you're going to have to fill that. Or spray a couple little shots of a high build primer and then block it, but we're probably not going to mix up that much. We'll use a little bit of filler or glaze and, fill any of those little low spots if we got them. But all in all, you can see our orange peel. You can just barely feel it. Like, it's pretty faint. So even putting that stuff on thick, it's pretty forgiving that way. This is going to block out pretty easy. And I think this was like 2 really, really fat coats. The other side, I think, was like 3. maybe 3.5 coats, kind of. There's quite a bit on the other side. But that's it. We're not going to bore you with a video any longer than it is already. We're at 25 minutes, so we'll cut her short here. But as you can see, the little bit that I showed you didn't take that long. So, a few hours to block this out. Half a day, you can probably block out 2 quarters. And again, it depends on the car. Here we're doing a 9-foot quarter on one of the longest cars that exists, right? So when you're doing a Camaro or something, it could take less. But keep in mind, Dodge Darts, this Cadillac, long panels, and even though they're a little round and convex, it is a long straight panel. So they take some time. Where you get into like a Chevelle or a Camaro, you've got a lot of curves. So you got to watch how you block it and do it a little differently for it to flow. But it's all the same principle. With this, we don't want our blocks to flow and curve too much. We want them to just be cutting it down kind of flat, because this is a big car. And even though there's a little bit of a round like this, where it hits the body lines, it's got to be pretty flat. And even here, it's rounded this way, but this way it's kind of flat. But as you come up, now all of a sudden it becomes like a log in here. It's round. And then your body lines and whatnot. So this will all block together. We'll block this together. We'll block the top. And then we'll kind of feather off our edges and corners at the very end to just refine them nicely. And that is all. So watch your corners. Work on all the flats. Get them first. And then work off the flat to come up to your corners. And then just easily take that little bit of an edge off. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Cheers.